Hi, Patricia Martucci here, licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed in New York, New Jersey, and California. And I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner and EMDR therapist, among some other different things. But for today, I wanted to talk a little bit about defensive response cycles and the patterns that we can find ourselves in today if we haven't really gotten the chance or the opportunity to complete some of those defensive response cycles. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens with anger. So basically, and it's the fight cycle. So we have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn so far. And those are all really natural reactions that we have when an instinct comes up that we feel threatened. We can either fight, and some people do that. We can fight, we can run, try to leave the situation. We can freeze. That happens a lot of the time, especially with sexual assault. Or we can fawn, which is we try to take care of the person that's hurting us and please them so that we feel safe and okay. So what I see a lot in my practice is that I can, especially when I'm working with adults, there's some patterns that I've been seeing with anger where we can feel stuck in our anger and just feel like we're angry people. I guess I also live in New York now, so maybe this is reasonable, but I think that what can happen, and what I learned happens quite often in my somatic experiencing training that I found really interesting, is that when we're children, and let's just say I'm going to use a scenario where let's just say that it's physical abuse, and there's a little boy and he's getting either we'll say physically abused. It could be verbal abuse too, by a parent. So basically, as a little child, we don't really have any sort of power. We have very little power because our whole life depends upon it depends upon our parents being willing to take care of us. So if there's a situation where a child has, it can be a teenager too, it can really be anyone, but in this case, a child, feels threatened, and their natural instinct is to fight back. And they've tried to fight back again by yelling or, punching or doing something that would help them fight back. And they've discovered that only gets them hurt even more. And that puts them in a worse position. What they learn to do a lot of the time is push down and suppress that defensive response cycle. So in order for defensive response cycles to sort of resolve themselves, and we call it to come to a point of completion, we need to feel like the cycle itself has completed and we've been able to either physically get the anger out or gotten it out in a way that feels like, okay, I was able to move this through my body and I feel like I'm on the other end of it. So oftentimes what can happen is when that gets repressed, because we have an override system in our brain come through that says, you can't trust your intuition to act upon this natural response because that's gonna get you into a worse off situation, and that's really conditioning, then we do learn to suppress them. So what can happen in these cases is that we can find ourselves having our anger come up and try to complete itself when something gets triggered inside in a different situation that can trigger that similar reaction and feeling. And so this can come up a lot. Have you ever met anybody that it takes barely anything for them to get into a fight, or physically they just are always looking to fight people? Oftentimes it's that defensive response cycle trying to complete. And so what we can do in therapy is, and somatic experiencing therapy in particular, is help our clients to complete these defensive response cycles so that the connection to the events that happened earlier in their life that really needed to have this completion connected to it can get completed. It's never too late to do that. And that's some of the work that we do with somatic experiencing. So there is a possibility to do that. And a lot of the time my clients will feel very, very satisfied to know what's going on with them. Because sometimes we can't know and we just feel like, wow, I have a lot of anger. I don't know where this comes from. And it can be disproportionate to the situation. Oftentimes it can also get us into trouble. When we haven't been able to express anger and we've suppressed it, it doesn't go anywhere. It actually just hangs out until another situation where something comes in that triggers that, and oftentimes it can get worse and worse over time. Much of the time as well, if we have learned that, again, that anger over and over again isn't acceptable, and then we learn in the world it isn't acceptable, what we can do is try to find bigger ways to suppress the anger, that are actually even more problematic. And this shows up a lot in addiction, also in eating disorders. And even OCD, different situations where we find our brain develops systems or mechanisms to either distract or try to avoid feeling the emotions that we don't have the tools to know how to express them and how to really get to that state of completion and release. So I often check when I have clients come in who have addiction, much of the time underneath is a defensive response cycle trying to complete. And, in situations that really don't align with the original reason and need for it. And that can get us into a lot of trouble. I mean, we can even end up doing criminal activity and going to jail. And so I think it's really important that we can educate our clients on this and ourselves, and also reassure them that there are ways that they can feel that release and relief and really allow for that cycle to complete, connected with the anger that they felt early on, usually or oftentimes in life, that they didn't really have the support around them or the tools or the people or the resources to be able to address that as it was coming up for them. So, we kind of walk around this and we take this with us throughout our lives. So I would love to hear questions, comments, feedback, if you guys come across this a lot in your practice or if you identify with this pattern as well. And I'll be also sharing examples of fawning, freezing, and flighting, and how we can get into these repetitive patterns of trying to complete these cycles that, without realizing what's going on, that really only create more harm for us in our lives and really oftentimes damaged relationships. So thanks again for watching, and if you like hearing about this, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.